This morning we're going to be in Acts chapter 16, verses 19 through 40. And you're probably all very familiar with this passage. Most of the book of Acts we're pretty familiar with because it's stories that we've heard, especially when you get to the middle of the book where you're dealing with the stories of where Paul went, what he was doing, those different things. And so maybe you don't know the exact, every minute detail of it, but you probably have a pretty good, background story thought, about it. If I say something about the jailer, there's certain things that kind of key into your brain about what was going on in that situation. I find that as we go through, like we did with Matthew, as you go through entire books of the Bible, though, there are certain things that you just kind of zero in on, and you start to connect with other parts of the book of Matthew. With the book of Acts, you do the same thing because you're kind of catching things that maybe you didn't mesh together before in the past. And I found that for myself, I'm 42. I've been working in the church or around the church or with the church or for the church or whatever since I was 20-ish. And so in all that time, there are things that now I'm making connections with that I just never did before. There are things that I'm catching that I just didn't quite see in the same way in the past about what was going on and why that mattered. And so in this passage, you're kind of dealing with this birth of the church in this area that is very opposed to its birth. In a lot of these places that they've been going, you have the Jewish world that's already there. So you have God-fearers. You have people that are kind of already in place to be, ready for the Messiah, to hear the good news. And then in some places you have a very strictly Roman, a very strictly Greek worldview, to where in the same way that we would say someone is pagan because they follow another form of religion, some other god or whatever, that's the same thing that they're saying about the Paul that's coming in, is that he is not worshiping the emperor in the way that they should believe that they should worship the emperor, that their entire pantheon of gods, he's saying that is wrong, and they're basically saying, hey, this is what we do. The way that they practice and go to these different temples and everything that goes along with that. Whenever they're saying that Paul is not just coming in here and telling them something, they keep saying this phrase. You're going to see it again in the next week where he goes to Athens. But you see this thing where it's not just that he's coming in and telling us other things. They say he's turning the world upside down. He's taking the worldview, the understanding that they have of the world, and he's flipping it on its head. We all have a worldview. We all have a thing, a way, a lens, whatever, that we see the world through. We all have a cultural context, whether that is that you are a middle-class white person from the South in the year 1980 to 2074. I don't know. That's a long time probably. But, just you kind of have certain things about you. Politically, you know things about how the world works and how it doesn't work. If you were from a previous generation, there's certain things that you're going to see the world in a different way. I found that people that lived through the Depression, they were very, very funny about throwing anything away. I don't know if you've got a grandmother or somebody that, there's butter dishes for a reason. They came like that because we needed extra, Tupperware. There was just stuff that was never going to go away because that was the way that they viewed the world. Was, man, I lived through this time of a very severe, we would almost say famine in that way. So it sticks with you. If you lived through a time where there was war, world wars, there was a different way that you viewed the world. If you lived through the time where Vietnam was happening, there's a way that you're viewing the world, the sexual revolution and the 60s and all of that stuff. There's just certain ways that you're going to see the world that another generation or another group is not going to see it. And then you get outside of even just the American context and you start talking to people that are in India or Tanzania or any other part of the world. And the way that their cultural lens works is going to be different. And what you have here is that Paul is going out of the let's say the Eastern world, the Jewish world, and he's going into the Western world. I remember years ago, I really like history. I probably didn't always like history. I didn't like learning or reading. Somehow I my mom's sitting right there, so I don't know if I can say that. I graduated high school, but I never read one book. Literally, not one. I read the backs of a lot of books and wrote book reports on that. I remember one time I dressed up as Al Capone, and I took a rubber band gun with me. Me and my best friend Scott, neither of us read any of the book, but we did a book report, an oral book report on a book we didn't read, and got A's because we dressed up like the person in the book. I also went to a small private Christian school, so probably got away with a lot more. As one of those deals where you could sweep the floor and get extra credit. That's probably how I passed a lot of classes. But there's certain things that you're going to look at in your world that are just going to be a different way that you view the world, how you think about things. And I remember learning about history and how we came to the point that we're at now. Was this moment, the Battle of Thermopylae? Is if you know anything about that, you probably got a pretty good picture in your head. You've got the Spartans, you've got the Greek world being rallied to go to war against the Persians. And you have this spot, they made a movie about it, it's very historically accurate, it's not at all. But you have this moment where there's the Hot Gates, there's this place where there's one very small area where they're going to have this fight. And they're going to have to go through these places. And if the Greek world falls at this place, the Eastern world is going to come in and overtake it. It's not just that they wanted to come in and rule these places. What the king of Persia would do is he would come in and he would ask you for earth and water. And what he was saying is, I want to rule this, but you can kind of do your thing here, but it's going to be my way. Everything's going to be me. I own it all. And so if you would have had just a very different, small outcome there, the entire way that the world would work and the thought process of these people at this time would be Eastern rather than Western. But what you have here is Paul crossing over from this very Eastern way of thinking into this very Western way of thinking. And really think about it in the way that we think about things now. If you were to go to the Middle East and talk about things, if you talk to a Jewish person, just the way that their mind works with stories, do you know that the reason that you have a propensity to want an answer to every question is because you have like a Neoplatonic Western mindset. It's Greek. It's we can work through all the problems and we can figure it out. In an Eastern mindset, that is not the way that they think. In the same way, they're okay with having things be up in the air in some ways. They think of a story and they think of what they learn from it rather than having an answer to everything. It drives me crazy because I want an answer to every problem that exists, right? I think there's nothing that can't be solved until you run up to one where it can't. And so when you have this, you need to understand the background is not simply Paul taking a new thing to a different place that's going to be the same way as everywhere else. That the reason they lock him up in prison is not because he just says something that they don't like, but they're seeing it as he is taking the order, the way things are, the way things they know it, and he's reversing it. He's flipping it over. And if you have someone like that in your community, I mean, even in our country, think about people in our country that have shook things up a little bit. Think about people like JFK, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. Let's think about a very certain time. People that weren't going along with the way that the order was liking it to go. What happened to them? They're done, right? We have a way, the world, that is in power does not typically like someone to come in and undermine them. So you end up with getting rid of that. That's sort of what's going on here, is that someone is coming in, shaking up the perceived order, and they're getting rid of him. They're putting him out of their influence. And so as you get into, we'll read chapter 16, verses 19 through 24 first. It says, "But when her owner saw that their hope of gain was gone," it's talking about this young lady that is possessed, that is predicting the future and all that sort of stuff. They've been using her as someone who is basically like a fortune teller. And it says, "When they see that their hope of gain was gone, they seized Paul and Silas, dragged them into the marketplace before the rulers, and when they had brought them to the magistrates, they said, 'These men are Jews and they are disturbing our city. They advocate customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to accept or practice.' The crowd joined in attacking them, and the magistrates tore their garments off them and gave orders to beat them with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this order, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in stocks." So we have this position where they are in a, not just in the prison, but they're in the inner prison. If you do a little research about how that worked, some people would tell you that the inner prison was where you went right before you were executed. That's most likely not true. There was another kind of like a death row area that would be the innermost prison. But they're not just put into the courtyard. They're not just put into a cell. Think like the drunk tank. They're not put into that. They're put into the inner prison. They're put into stocks with their feet, where if you've ever been let's say you've been beat up, or you've had just a really physical day, and you're laying in bed and it's comfortable, but you just need to do what? I got to move around. I got to shift. My arm's going to sleep if I lay that way. They're put them in stocks so that it forces them to stay in one posture and position. It's not just we're going to keep you secure. It does that, but it also makes it very, very uncomfortable. It's a penalizing thing. And so they beat him with rods. They put him in the prison. Now they've got him in stocks. The first thing that I was thinking with all of this is, if this young lady, this slave girl that these men are using to predict the future, one of two things is happening. Either, number one, she can't really predict the future. There's certain things she didn't see coming, like this. Or maybe the owners were just bored that day and they didn't go to her and say like, "Hey, what's going to happen today?" Because it seems like they should have seen this whole scenario coming, right? It's an interesting moment that you have where the very person that you would expect to be able to kind of see what's going on doesn't. This is not the first or the last time that Paul's going to be dragged into prison, or just dragged in and out of a place that he's going to have to leave under the cover of darkness. The charge that they bring against him is twofold. Number one, that they're Jews. This would have a lot to do with the fact, or the idea, simply that they're not loyal citizens. I feel like we can kind of identify with that in some ways in our own country, to where you look back to the 60s. Let's just stay in that time. Let's go back to actually the 40s and the 50s, when you had the Red Scare, and you had people that were in Hollywood or people that were in government that were accused of being communists. And what happened? You didn't have to be one. You just had to be accused of one. And that was enough. It meant that you were not loyal. You weren't someone that could be trusted in government or in the entertainment industry or just in the country. You were seen as someone who was an other, an outsider. And so that's kind of the situation that they're saying about them. These are Jewish people. They're not part of us. They don't practice the same customs. They don't worship the same gods. They don't do the stuff we do. They're not loyal citizens like the rest of us. And so he says, first off, they're Jews. And number two, they're disturbing the order in the city. This is a pretty big crime when it comes to the Roman world. If you remember back to the whole story with Jesus and what was going on in the city, it was not even necessarily that they cared so much about what he was saying as the Roman people. It's that it was disturbing the peace. If you were disturbing the peace in that situation, if you were even hinting at causing things to become a riot, like you were in trouble, their whole thing was going to be the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. That wasn't just, hey, we've got peace everywhere and it's going to be sweet and awesome. That meant an enforcing of the peace with brutality in most ways. And so that's what's going on here. They're saying, hey, they're bringing chaos. They're disrupting things. They're going to cause a riot. The preaching of the gospel as well as belonging to God's kingdom will often cause consequences. This thing that we do, this being in the kingdom, this being followers of Christ, it's countercultural. Even though we live in a semi-Christian worldview country, it's still counterculture. It's still different if you literally practice what the Bible says. If you lay aside the things of this world for the next, it's going to be counterculture, and there's going to be people that are not going to like that. Specifically, oftentimes, government people are not going to care for the way that you have loyalties that align somewhere else besides here. It's going to be difficult. And so there's oftentimes going to be persecution or trouble, especially, here is one thing, in my friend that's in India, they have the radical, the Hindus. You would never think of Hindus as being radicalized or being mean or anything, but when they're burning your house down and threatening to kill your children, you realize you are outside of what they believe. You're against them. That's how this world works. You're either in the group or you're out of the group. You're for us or against us. And so when you live in this way where you literally give your allegiance, your believing loyalty to God rather than whatever else, even if that is the governing authorities, it's not going to go well. This is because we still live in this world. We live in, realistically, what you could think of as like enemy territory every day. This is the one reason that having the church exist is important, because you find you have a place to actually exist with other people that are doing the same thing. It's not simply a nostalgic thing of a place where I like the way these songs are, or I agree with what they do politically, or anything like that. It's that you have people to literally come alongside you and live in the same way that you're living. That's the point, is that as we have families that live in our communities that are followers of Christ, they're like islands or beacons or beachheads or however you need to think of that. When we congregate, when we join that together as the church, it demonstrates that we, number one, have other people that are with us in that, but it also shows to the world that there's something different here. That it's not just the same thing. It's not just a corporate thing that exists to try to fill a need within our community. That it's actually a different organism. It's a different kingdom with different values. So they were beaten, mocked, and imprisoned. I don't know about you. I've never been beaten. Like seriously beaten. Like I got spanked when I was a kid, and I've always said, as I got older, I deserved every single one I ever got, and probably way more that I didn't get. I've never been drug out. I've had the police point a gun at me more than once, but they didn't then pull out their batons and hit me. They realized it was a mistake and went on with their life. But this idea of being beaten and mocked and ridiculed, that's something that most of us, that would be like the rest of your life. You would be thinking about that thing that happened to you. You would tell other people about it. But for them, it was just like a Tuesday. This was a normal part of being in the world that they were in. If you disagree with what we say, just like everything with in the book of Matthew and everything else, this world has one lever that it can pull constantly, and it will pull constantly, and that's violence. The government, the people of other factions or whatever, the one thing that they're constantly going to go to is violence. If you will not comply, then violence is the only thing that happens. That's why we get into wars and all of these other things. That's why it was so important that with Christ, when he was standing before Pilate, and he says, don't you know I have the power of life and death? I have the power to crucify you. And when he doesn't respond, and he doesn't beg for his life, and he doesn't, all of those things, what does Pilate do? He's like, whoa, hang on a second. This is different. There's something different here. So you have Paul and Silas, they're beaten. I don't think that we should seek out this type of treatment, that the proof of our relationship or some kind of a holiness test is how mistreated we are, how many times you've been beaten or whatever. I think it's part of many people that are followers of Christ. It's part of their life in other parts of the world. But I don't think it's something that we should seek out or be trying to get into. They're placed in this inner prison. It's not just a place that's to kind of hold you until you can be released back out, or you pay a fine, or you do whatever. This was a place that you put people that you saw as politically and culturally dangerous. You did not want what they were saying or doing to be seen by anybody. You didn't want to give them a platform. You didn't want to put them in a position to where they had the ability to spread what it is they believed. It says in verse 25, it says, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. This is a weird thing. The book of Acts is full of weird things, but this is a weird thing. You've been beaten. I don't know about how you feel. I would probably be not happy. I would be uncomfortable. I'd be rubbing the big bump that's on my head and like, oh, that hurts. Nobody's caring for you or attending to you, so that's kind of a bad thing. Also, you're in prison, and it's dark. You're in the inner prison. There's not windows. That's kind of part of it. And it's stinky. It's stale. There's no fans to move the air around. You're just in a bad position. And you're in stocks. Your feet are in a position directly out in front of you where you're sitting and you can't move them. And you can't get into a comfortable position. You can't move. You're just stuck. And the thing that Paul and Silas decide to do in that is to sing praises to God. That's... there are many stories in the Bible that I read, and I'm like, I want to put myself in there because I think I'd be doing the same thing, and that's awesome, and I'd be a super mega Christian just like them. And I read this, I'm like, no, I would be complaining. I'd be praying, but it'd be like, God, why are you doing this to me? Why do you hate me? It would be, what is going on? I would want to talk to somebody, especially if I knew what Paul knows about, something that's going to come up in a minute. But if I knew I had some ability to get myself out of that situation, I would be looking for that way to get out of that situation. I don't like to be uncomfortable. I don't like to be in pain. I don't like to be mistreated or mocked or ridiculed. None of those things. So the fact that their response to this is to sing praises and to worship God, that is why you have this moment where it says the prisoners were listening to them. That everyone that could hear what was going on was listening to them. It wasn't just because what they were saying was profound or something. It's because they had earned the right to have influence over these people, because what was going on in their life and what was happening to them, then the way they responded, it demonstrated that there's something different about what they have to say. It demonstrates that what's happening doesn't make sense, so what's going on right now, we should maybe listen to these guys. Or we want to at least hear what's happening. It's one of the moments where you expect desperate pleading in prayer, or even pleading to the authority to be released. Why am I being treated this way? When I'm doing what God has asked me, what have I done wrong that has got me in this place of punishment? Has God forgotten about me? The idea of singing hymns and praying out loud in this dire situation is unusual, to say the least. This is the very thing that landed them in prison. The thing that they're proclaiming right now in prison is the thing that got them into prison in the first place. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, if I was doing something and I got a spanking over it, or I got grounded, or I got, whatever the thing was, the punishment, the next moment was unlikely going to be to do the same thing again. Maybe sometimes, but, not oftentimes. You typically are going to be like, this is what got me in trouble, therefore I'm not going to do that for a minute. I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to try to get myself out of trouble. So for them to continue to go right back to where the very thing that got them in trouble is very strange. There could not be much better example of upsetting the customs of a place. They should have been terrified and mourning, but instead they're praising and praying. The customs of a place are funny, but the customs of a place like prison, you don't really have to think about them a whole lot. It's sorrowful, it's mournful, it's ouchy, this is bad, I don't like it. So to be in that place and to be proclaiming the greatness of God, to be praising Him and praying for those that are around you, to understand and hear the gospel. You're upsetting the customs in a very peculiar way. In verse 26 it says, "And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were open, and everyone's bonds were unfastened." What? Like, what's going on? What kind of earthquake comes through and it's like, click, and all the doors, it just open up, and it's like everybody's free now. What do you think you would do? If I've been beaten and I'm in stocks and all that, I'm going to hobble myself out of there as quick as I can. Even in the dark, I'm going to be bumping into things, but I'm just looking for a way out. It just seems like, here's an answer to prayer. You're released. It's freedom. Boom. It says, "When the jailer woke and saw that the prison doors were open, he drew a sword and was about to actually end his own life, supposing that the prisoners had escaped." Understand just for a moment how serious it was taken. That when you were given charge over prisoners, if you did not, if you let them go, this is what the consequences was. You were going to lose your life. That probably says something about the consequence of what Paul and Silas were actually facing. They might have been on the way to being martyred. There's a good chance of that. Because when you see this jailer, immediately he's like, I know what I have to do. I don't want them to do it to me. I'm just going to do it myself. That says something. I don't know. I've worked in places before. I worked in a warehouse for a long time. The very first day that they put me on a forklift, I was like, I've been driving a forklift since I was a kid. I've got no problem with forklifts. I'm going to whip this thing around. I'm going to be running 130%. So fast. It's going to be awesome. Just wait and see. And then the very first thing I did was I put my forks in a pallet on the very top. It was like 25 feet, 30 feet in the air. And it had crates of water. The milk crates with 4-gallon jugs of water in each one of them. There's about 20 or 40 or however many on there. And as soon as I touched that thing, the pallet fell apart and every single one of those things fell down on me. I got a shower, right there on my first day. That was not one of those moments that I was proud of. But my thing was not, okay, well, I guess I better just go ahead and take myself out, or I'll just leave, or whatever. I knew the consequences were going to be something, but they weren't going to be that bad. This is serious. This is a bad thing for him to feel like immediately, there's no point in even trying. There's no point in going on tomorrow. This is bad. It says, but Paul cried with a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And the jailer called for lights and rushed in, and trembling with fear, he fell down before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And they said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all that were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night and washed their wounds. And he was baptized at once, he and all his family. Then he brought them up into his house and set food before them. And he rejoiced along with his entire household that he had believed in God. So you have this incredible moment where if they had just taken that, hey God, you're showing me, like, you just loosened my things, I'm going to skedaddle. Like, that would have not allowed them to actually perform what it was that they were called to be in that situation to do. That this jailer would not have seen the goodness and the glory of God and who he was through Paul and Silas in that very situation. God sometimes allows us, oftentimes allows us, to go through times of persecution and pain and difficulty. And oftentimes we look at it and we say, this doesn't make sense. I'm doing everything right. I'm making sure to be generous with my money to other people, to be generous with my time, to love people, to forgive people. I'm making sure to do all of these things. And yet my life is difficult. There's hard times. There's somebody that just genuinely hates me and is seeking my downfall, whatever. But it's amazing that in the midst of those things, it's oftentimes not in our successes and how great we are at things. It's in our failures. It's in our difficult times. It's in our persecution that God usually tends to use us more. That seems to be what's going on here, is that Paul and Silas, they're not in the best circumstance and situation here. They're in pain. They're hurt. If we believe in this idea of an exchange relationship with God, that I exchange my good works and my right behavior and my tithe money and my attendance, at church and all of those things, that I just exchange that with God for His good favor towards me, then what's happening here makes zero sense. We don't have anything to give to God that He desires. It's when you go back, it's just like what Caleb mentioned last week. God's like, I've got the cattle on 1,000 hills. If I was hungry, you know what I would do? I wouldn't tell you, because I can take care of it myself. God doesn't need our actions. He desires to partner with us in these things because He wants us to feel useful in this stuff. He wants us to be a part of it, to demonstrate His glory and His awesomeness through us. Not because He doesn't have the ability to do it Himself. God can do all things. The point of all of this is that He desires to work with us and through us. It's not that He's looking out in the world and saying, this person has the right talent, and this person has the right temperament, and this person is placed in the right place, and I need to, if they don't do it right, though, nothing's ever going to happen. He literally desires you to be in partnership with you, to work through you, to empower you. Not for your own ability to have a good life and overcome bad stuff, but to demonstrate His glory in hard things oftentimes. To demonstrate His glory to a world that is watching about what we say, if it matches up to what we believe. Maybe I should say the other way. What we believe matches up to what we say sometimes. So you have this moment where this Roman, not just a average guy off the street. I mean, this guy's the jailer of the Roman jail in Philippi, right? That's where we are, Philippi. This guy would be pretty up there in the echelon of the government and how he would be seen. This guy would have people that were under him. That as he walked into a room, there would be people that salute him or do whatever Roman people do. This guy would have had power and authority. So whenever he sees this, he understands that there is something different. He understands that what Paul and Silas are coming into this community and talking about has actual power. I was thinking about this a little bit this week. You have this moment here where you have a psychic, fortune-telling person, whatever. And I know that there's people that have been going to this person. It's made the two people that own this girl, or whoever it is that owns her, a lot of money and kind of built them up and all of that. So there's obviously something that's coming about that. And you have this whole society that's built up around that kind of world, that we're going to give money, or we're going to give stuff, or we're going to do whatever it is to these gods, to these emperors. We're going to demonstrate our fealty and our how awesome they are, and then they're going to give us increase. They're going to give us money and influence and power and all of that stuff. And so when you see someone come into this scenario where that is the understanding, and they just say, no more. And that one of those outlets where you see the power that they are experiencing is just dried up. It's just shut off right there. Imagine what that would do to your worldview, how you see the world. If all you really see the world is power, and you just see there is a greater power than the one that I'm worshiping. There is something that is more powerful than this thing. This is weak and ineffective, and this is powerful. You have this moment where there is this inner jail. I mean, that is like the epitome of you are in trouble. This is the government of Rome demonstrating to you that we have power and authority over you. We can take your very life. This jailer he's used to it. He's probably closed those irons around people's arms or hands a million times. He was so familiar with what this meant. And he was so familiar with people that were in that position going in despair, because they knew that there was a power that he wielded that was over what they had. For him to see an earthquake just go click, and all of that power that he felt, that he understood and wielded, all of the awesome nature of the Roman world and government that is lined up, demonstrated in this jail, is just, I love that it doesn't say it collapsed. or there was an explosion. It just says the doors go, the doors open, and the shackles are just like click, and are off. That's just it. I imagine there was an angel that was going through, he's like click, 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 and he's pushing doors open. And it's just slow and quiet. But it's this demonstration that there's nothing to the power that you think you have, and there's something that is greater and more and bigger. That's why he immediately goes, what do I need to do to have what you have? There's no big showy thing to it. He just sees real life Christianity, followers of God, the kingdom of God on display, and he desires it. He wants it. He wants to see that. And it doesn't just go into his life, it goes into his entire family. It says it's demonstrated that now his whole, like this person that represented this previous kingdom is now a representative of the kingdom of God. It's a pretty serious thing. It's a pretty incredible way to present the gospel. I wrote this here, but I already said it. I'll just say it again. But it reminds me of Jesus before Pilate. Jesus knew where the real authority lies. What does he tell Pilate? He's like, you would have no authority except for that it was given to you by my Father. He knew how this works. Do we walk around in this world in that same way? Understanding that there is an authority outside of the authority that you're so used to? The police or the government or the boss or whoever is in charge of you or whatever. That there's something greater and more and bigger that we appeal to and that we represent and that we're a part of. I think oftentimes we have trouble with that. I know I do. They demonstrated that they had so much confidence in their God that they didn't take matters into their own hands. Whew, that's a hard thing. The Roman jailer with all of his authority had probably never known confidence like this. I imagine there were many times where he had prayed or put out a sacrifice or done this or that to try to get a result, and that result never came. He didn't get what he wanted. There was probably times where he had done all of the right things and maybe not gotten whatever it was that he wanted. To see these two men that were in the opposite position of power displaying confidence that he couldn't even understand, that's something different. When we walk about in this world displaying that there is nothing and nobody that can take me out of the hand of the Father, that can dissuade the will of God, that can stop what he's doing, that can be more than him, that can stay his hand. the might of this world, were it all to be funneled in one direction towards him, wouldn't even slow him down. I like to think of this sometimes. You ever seen the movie The Princess Bride? And he's fighting Andre the Giant, and he's doing all this stuff. He's throwing giant rocks at him. He's punching him as hard as he can. And it's just nothing is happening. It's just a pointless endeavor there for a little bit at least. That's how I like to picture it. It's like, it doesn't matter how much you've got, how hard you try. You'll never stop him. That's the kind of confidence that we can have in this world every day. It doesn't mean that we walk about in this world with our necks craned towards the sky, forgetting that anything exists and trying to just be one with. It's nothing like that. It's knowing that as you do what you're called to do in this world, it really doesn't matter what anybody else says or does. That if you're calling on people to repent, or you're going and telling people about who Christ is, or you're demonstrating his love in the midst of people not loving you, that it really, it's a temporary thing. That there's more power that he has than this world has to offer, or ever will have to offer. No matter how the metrics look on a day-to-day thing. Real quick, because I know we're out of time, I just want to finish this last little bit. It says, but when it was day, the magistrates sent the police saying, let those men go. So my immediate question is, wait a second, hold on. So Paul and Silas, they're in prison, earthquake, they don't leave. Jailer says, hey, what's up? I got to know about this. Says that he takes them out of the prison to his home, feeds them, binds their wounds, he's baptized. So they spend the whole night doing stuff, And then I guess he took them back to prison the next day. Now, that's kind of a weird thought, when you think about it. Like, hey, I think Paul was probably like, hey, you know what you got to do? We got to go back to jail. This is just, if we don't, they're going to kill you. So let's just go back to where, we all started here. So it says they send the police saying, let those men go. And the jailer goes to Paul. He's like, hey, he reports the words to Paul saying, the magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore, so because of this, come out now and go in peace. So Paul, he's going to be Paul here. He says, they have beaten us publicly, uncondemned men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly? No, let them come themselves and take us out. You just stop there for a minute. I'm telling you, if I was in jail, and I'm talking like good jail nowadays, like where it's like, they got to take care of you and it's not as bad as it. This is bad jail. If I'm in jail and they come like, hey, you can go home, I'm like, oh, I would be out of there. It'd be like the Wile E. Coyote thing where you just see the cloud and it's gone. Gone. The fact that Paul's like, now I'm going to show you. There's something about there too. It demonstrates that Paul knew this when they put him in prison. Paul knew this when they were beating him with rods in front of everybody. Paul knew this when he was accused, that he was a Roman citizen and he had rights, that they weren't allowed to do what they were doing. But he didn't use his rights in that time. He waited till the right time. He knew what to do. And it seems like he had a plan here. So it says, the police reported these words to the magistrates, to the governor, and they were afraid when they heard that these were Roman citizens. Why were they afraid? You ever just stopped for a moment and thought, why would they have been afraid? Who's going to know? They were afraid because there were consequences. That if you punished a Roman citizen, being a Roman citizen had really immense weight. And that if you punished a Roman citizen without a trial, without the right to do it, you ran the risk of not just losing your position, but being killed. They took this Roman law thing very, very seriously. It wasn't the way that we think of, well, this guy's in charge, so, if he messes up or he, fibs a little bit or does whatever, it's, it is what it is. If they figured it out, you were busted and you were done. So when they figure out that Paul is a Roman citizen, they know, we're done for. If he goes and tattles, we're in deep. It'll be us sitting in stocks. It'll be us facing possible execution. It'll be us losing our position. So it says they were very afraid. So they came to the prison. I like the thought of them coming to the prison. They go through the outer gate and they're coming in. It's dark and they're going into the innermost part of this prison. It's stinky and gross and there's people, wailing or whatever. I always picture in prison at this time there's somebody getting whipped. I don't know why, but I just hear the whip in the back of mine. And just that kind of thing. I think of, if you've ever read the book The Count of Monte Cristo, I'm always picturing the Chateau d'If, this just terrible, terrible place. And so they go in there, and now they've got to walk in, and what? Are they still in the stocks? Are they hanging out now? Are they sitting in reclined and waiting? They have to come and apologize. I've always kind of wondered why this part of the story exists. He says, and they took them out and asked them to leave the city. So they're like, hey, why don't you go on and just skedaddle? I almost feel like they were reaching in their pockets, reaching for here's some stuff. Just leave, get out of here. Why did Paul do this? Why did Paul push the point? So they went out of the prison and visited Lydia. Lydia was their first convert there. And when they had seen the brothers, they encouraged them and departed. So why? Paul's refusal to immediately leave the prison is a unique situation in history and just in understanding. It seems as though God is using Paul's temperament and boldness, just the nature of who he is, to demonstrate something. And I believe that this isn't just Paul making a decision, that Paul is obviously being led by the Holy Spirit in the midst of all these things. But you got to remember that Paul's point of being in the city was not just to be there and to hang out and be part of the government or anything like that. Paul is there to make disciples and then start a church. So they've done that. They've got Lydia. They've got these other God-fearers that are now part of this church that they've been meeting with, going out to the outside of the wall by the river, and they're all meeting, they're praying, and they're doing that. Now they're meeting together in Lydia's house. So this church thing is started. Now you got the jailer, that he's going to be part of this as well. So there's people that as he leaves, he's going to be leaving behind, that are going to be followers of Christ, the representative of the kingdom of God in this city. I think Paul wants to demonstrate to them, hey, there's going to be persecution that comes. When I leave here, there's most likely going to be some stuff that happens. But we're going to make it, I'm going to try at least to demonstrate to these people that are in authority that they can't just do it however they want to. That you still have positions and you still are citizens. I'm going to try to make it a little bit easier on you. There's something that we can do in this world where it's persecution's going to come. Difficult times are going to come. But if we have the ability to mitigate those things for other people, if we have the ability to make it a little bit easier, to put these people in a position that better allows them to continue to gather together, especially when it's a brand new thing. He wants to give them the best opportunity possible in this community to be able to have influence. He also doesn't want to sneak away like a criminal. If you just leave, you were downtown one day, everybody's beating you and screaming and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden you just are gone. That's indicative that what you were saying is like a bad, dangerous thing. He wants to demonstrate that what he's saying is okay. There are Roman citizens that are believing this and going with this and are going to continue to proclaim this. It wasn't just Paul being Paul, the way that we kind of think of him sometimes. Brash and hey, you got to come and kiss the ring, because if you don't, you're in trouble. He's wanting to use his position of authority that he has as a citizen to make it better for other people around him. I find that so often with Paul, I think of him as just this kind of a cannonball, right? He's just running through the Mediterranean and now Europe, just with his head down, just saying, everybody do what I say, and just beating it all through. But there's moments like this where you see that it's not that. There's often times where he's demonstrating his care especially for those new believers and that new church that's going to be in the city. It's going to be hard. They're going to face persecution. Some of them, probably most of them, will end up in prison in the same way. That Roman jailer most likely is going to end up in the jail that he's been guarding this entire time. It's a strong possibility. He wants to put them on the best foot. He's caring for them like his children. It demonstrates the way that we should care for one another, that we don't put people in a position to, sorry, you're just going to have to gut it out and figure it out. That's why the church exists together, or for us to be together, so that we can lift one another up and care for one another. This thing that is being demonstrated is not just Paul's boldness. That's a cool thought. I like that. He is pretty bold to sit there in prison and be like, come on down here, baby boy. That's a wild thought. But in the midst of this, it's demonstrating that there's great care that he's taking for these people that he's bringing into this thing. He wants to put them on the best foot that they can possibly be. The way that we care for one another in this church, the way that we care for other followers of Christ that are in other countries or that we may never meet face to face, that we monetarily care for them, or we pray for them, or we encourage them in different ways. It's important that we do that. That if this thing that we do as the church becomes insular and it becomes all we care about is how this works here, and we forget that we exist to be outward focusing, that not only here but in our own lives and our families, with our kids and our husbands and wives, or whatever, that we exist for something more than just this thing, that we exist to take it out into the rest of the world. Paul is demonstrating that through the way that he's caring for these, his brothers and sisters in Christ. He's also demonstrating great faith, believing loyalty, and just all kinds of things that we can take away from this. I hope that as we continue on through the book of Acts and we think about all of these different things, that it won't be just let's look at what we see here and think that's cool and Paul did some cool stuff and it's history and all that, but that we would look at it and consider this is the way that we are to behave in this world. How does that look in the context in which we live? How does that look when we have the government that we have, or the people in government that we have? How does that look when we live just say it. We live in a society that is wealthy beyond any other society that has ever existed in the entire world. In history, we live in a world that is comfortable. Comfortable is dangerous. How do we do these kinds of things when we're real used to air conditioning? And we're really used to 3 meals a day. And we're really used to, I think I want Skittles. And I can just go get Skittles. How do we live in that world while being influenced to follow this kingdom that is ever present, that is above all, and that is awesome? That's questions that we have to ask in our own lives, of our own stuff. And I would encourage you to ask those questions and think about those things. Let's pray.